Hi everyone, welcome to the session. I'm Sarthak and Shubhankar, a graduate of IIT Bombay from the class of 2020. I'm here joined by Shubhankar, who is also my batchmate and a co-coordinator at Student Mentor Program.
Hello everyone. Sarthak and I today are going to take a session on time management and prioritization. And between the two of us, we've had a lot of diverse experiences while we were at the institute. And we hope to draw on them both as students and as mentors to give you some hopefully useful advice that you can leverage when you try to tackle these challenges. So I think let's get straight to it, Sarthak, and let's start from the very beginning. So I feel that the freshman year has some very unique, distinctive challenges. So can you tell us more about them?
Yeah, so personally for me, when I entered IIT, so first of all, before that, you already are quite exhausted, by the very nature of the examination that you have been through. And, you don't really know, you haven't really met a lot of people. And, this is the first time that you're going to be in such a very, contained and confined environment with so many smart people from all corners of the country. So it first of all makes you very anxious, and there is also different types of struggles in terms of adjusting. And most importantly, whenever you enter IIT, your first dream is to kind of, kill the academics. So that is also one of the most important things in the minds of each and every student. So I guess one or two, if I were to list one or two major challenges that I faced personally in my first semester first was, finding time to study because there was a lot of things that was going on parallelly. The second one was the trade-off that I faced in terms of, either to socialize with my wingmates or colleagues or previous friends, like from institutes or some coaching institutes, or, to actually actively participate in some other types of extracurricular activities, maybe, some sports activities or some clubs. So these are the kind of challenges that generally, people face. And personally for me also, I actually, face these challenges. Yeah.
Okay, great. And since we've just talked about this huge cultural change that you go through when you come to IIT, and then just the the sheer variety of activities that you have the options of exploring. So I think one of the most common dilemmas in the mind of a freshman is how do I decide what activity I pursue? I obviously can't pursue them all. So what metric should I use? Should it be interest? Should it be future utility? Just having fun, or the fact that my peer group is doing it? So how do you decide activities in your first year?
Right. So I guess previous exposure is like quite essential to kind of get the hang of what kind of activity is. In terms of the future utility, it's always good to talk to seniors or people who have already been there, so as to understand like whether it aligns with your interests and your aspirations or not. In terms of on a personal level, I feel apart from all these things, it is also very crucial and important to be on top of the time commitments that it's gonna ask for, right? Because at the very outset, you don't really know what kind of time commitments this entire activity will entail, but you should always be aware of that. And if you can somehow plan it and just make sure that you have enough information about that entire activity, I guess it's good to go. So essentially, you should be able to check all these three boxes before making any decision.
I think that's a brilliant point, Sarthak. And just to add to that, if you are one of those people who wants or aspires to balance multiple things,
Right.
it also becomes necessary to practice self-control to some extent. Because what happens here is that the moment you come to IIT, there's so much freedom. And more importantly, there's just so many distractions. So, from PUBG and CSGO to TV series and DC++, it's just impossible to avoid them, which is why exercising self-control becomes important. So for me personally, gaming or movies were never directly a problem, but I did feel that I was spending too much time on social media. So I started monitoring my screen time through this app called Quality Time Plus. And within a month, I had brought it down to acceptable limits. So another important aspect I feel is to also acknowledge that you're going wrong somewhere and then take corrective action.
Yeah.
And this self-control bit is also manifest in another aspect, that we forget that we have something called a body clock. So because we're not at home, nobody's telling us when to eat our meals or when to go to sleep. We, the body clock really is all over the place. Our timetables are messed up, and so we come to Insti, we decide that we will not be restricted by the norms of day and night. And essentially, when you know how this happens is that you end up sleeping in class, and what you don't appreciate is how much time this wastes and how much stress it creates. So even when you're done with lectures, you're still tired, short of sleep, and you've additionally missed out on whatever was taught. So you'll need to spend that much more time understanding it yourself. So I think if it's possible to some extent, practicing, staying away from distractions and focusing on self-control goes a long way in creating sufficient time for you to explore multiple activities. So Sarthak, like we were just talking about these unique challenges of the freshman year, you've barely learned to balance all of this when the second semester throws at you the entire ballgame of PORs as well. So, and they also are a significant aspect to consider as far as time management is concerned. So, what is your take on that?
Yeah, so particularly, talking about these second semesters, from my experience as a mentor and a student, I feel the first thing that comes to mind is the first question that comes to mind is whether should I pursue it or not? Whether it would hamper my academics or not, and to what extent, how should I know this? How should I gauge this? So I guess these are the sort of questions that, comes in our minds as freshmen. And, to kind of tackle all these things, it's always good to, just do your research, do your homework to understand what that particular POR or activity is all about. If you feel that it is kind of taking a toll on your main priority, then you should actually reconsider all the options. Also, in your second semester, I've seen that, many a times some of the students also, aspire to actually pursue two activities together in their second year. I guess this is something which, kind of places more number of trade-offs in crucial situations. Let's say you're faced in a situation in which, there is an exam tomorrow and there are a lot of other things to be done in terms of the obligations towards the POR. Right. So I guess to avoid these kind of conflicts, it's always necessary to be balanced, to take it slow. Just make sure that, whatever that you are kind of, putting on your plate, you are able to manage it, you are able to plan it. Don't bite that much that you cannot chew. At least in your initial years, it's always good to kind of get adjusted and accustomed to the environment around you, because even after second semester, in the second year, it will be your first year in your department. So there is a lot of change that happens. So it's not that seamless as expected, right? So these kind of changes also we should be very much aware of and on top of, so that we are always kind of making decisions very judiciously.
Right. So I think, from what I understand from what you're trying to say is that research before indulging in any activity, no matter how interested you are in it, or how many people of your peer group are doing it, or how cool it sounds.
Yes.
Research is very, very essential. One aspect of it is understanding what you're getting into. The second aspect of it is planning well for it. So can you've held a diverse range of PORs while at Insti, and you've participated in a lot of other activities as well. So can you tell us more about your planning routine?
Yeah, sure. So I guess that also differs a bit in terms of, the level of POR. So essentially in my second year POR, obviously it wasn't that hectic and strenuous. In my final year POR, obviously it was a position in which, there were more number of decisions to be taken on my part. And, the impact was also great in terms of, whatever decision that, goes into it, right? So since there is a very huge stakes involved over there, so you have to be very judicious in terms of, planning it out, because whenever you are there in tier 1 or tier 2 position, there are a lot of small tasks which have a very hard deadline that actually, crop up on a daily basis. Now, this is one of the challenges that I face in my final year. So for that, I always use the calendar, because, in my philosophy, I always thought of calendar because it actually gives me a more realistic picture of how much time I have, because ultimately we all are kind of bound by the time limits of 24 hours. So all we can do is like kind of allocate some time boxes or blocks in our schedules to actually a particular activity and focus on that only. So that being said, I guess that actually worked very well for me in terms of providing me with the mental clarity to kind of go ahead and do that task, and obviously on one hand to prioritize some of the tasks that have been assigned to me. Obviously I won't be able to do all of the tasks in one day, but it's essential to actually pick a few tasks, let's say 3 or 4, that you feel are absolutely essential and the deadline is quite near. Then you can actually use those tasks and just maybe do some time boxing in your calendars and then maybe proceed with it. Yeah,
I think that's a very important idea that you've just shared, Sarthak. That of course like you use calendar, so everybody needs to find some sort of a framework for a time management tool that works best for them. Simply because while you are in Insti, of course, if you're handling a major POR, that of course brings with it a whole range of deadlines, decisions, meetings that need to be held within certain time limits, etc. But even without that, simply when you're managing academics, there are deadlines for various quizzes, assignments, projects, that keep cropping up, and it's just hard to remember all of them. So if you have something like a calendar, or perhaps like I use to-do lists, so that that reduces the stress of having to remember all of them also. And of course, there is a great deal of satisfaction when you're able to get through those tasks as well. The other thing that I think you mentioned that was very important was, breaking down tasks, because of course some tasks seem very humongous, but breaking down and seeing what aspects can be prioritized, what aspects can be dealt with later, is also a good solution to see what do you want to deal with first. The other two aspects that I feel are very important, especially as you grow into your senior years, is that I think it's almost a part of the culture that we all begin to procrastinate a lot. So we let the initial part of the semester, which is light, slide away. We try to keep pushing things later and later, and essentially it's very difficult to get out of this cycle because everybody seems to be very comfortable doing it. So I think the first step that you need to do here again is just acknowledge that you're caught in this cycle and then try to break out of it. Just getting started is such a crucial step that really helps you get out of such a vicious problem. And finally, like we were just saying, and Sarthak and I were discussing before this session, that the objective of this session is not to tell you that you need to be working hard 24 hours a day, or that you need to be super productive all the time. The essence of this is that you need to be productive, consistent, and focused in a specific duration of the day, so that your output at that time, at that point of time, is sufficient, and that leaves you with enough time to do things that you enjoy, whether it's socializing or just engaging in other fun activities. Having said that, of course, neither Sarthak nor I are experts in this field. In fact, I don't think there's anyone I know who's managed their time very well all 4 years, all the time. So there are obviously moments where we all break down, there are meltdowns. And what's important is that at such moments, you don't get stressed out, or you don't try to, hold it against yourself. Instead, you should just reach out, talk to your friends, talk to seniors, talk to your mentors, counselors, the SWC, use other resources like Bandhu to ensure that you get the help that you need.